Hello, I'm Pam,
And I'm John.
and we're not done yet.
No, you betcha we're not done yet.
And it's Saturday night, happy hour.
Happy hour to you. Cheers.
Cheers, my dears. Um, so John picked the topic, and he's very good at that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you why you picked this topic. And they don't know yet what that topic is.
Well, I'll just give you a little hint. I love 50s rock and roll. And there's reasons why I love it.
Yeah.
I lived it, and it helped me through a lot of sad times.
Yeah. How's that?
Well, I was born in 1943. In 1953, I was 10 years old. Actually, I was 9 years old. And my father died. So it was a very sad time for me. I was close to my father. He left my mother with 6 kids. I was the oldest. So she had to bring up 6 of us, and with very little money. She wasn't happy. I don't blame her. But I really had a hard time finding a place in my world. And so music, the first song I remember hearing really on the radio was probably in 1952 or somewhere around there, and it was "Good Night Irene" by the Weavers. And they played that song a lot. I guess it was a big hit then. And I remember on morning radio when I was out in the kitchen, I'd hear that song, and I just loved that song. And then later on in 1954, a program called Hit Parade came on TV, and we had a TV then, and so I used to watch Hit Parade once a week. It was on, and it'd play the top hit music songs of the times, and they would be this actually was before rock and roll, about a year before rock and roll really took off. But I liked those songs, but they weren't anything like rock and roll. They were like Rosemary Clooney, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Patti Page, and so on. They were what I'd call pop songs. And there were a few rock and roll songs out during that period, but none of them were popular enough to be on Hit Parade. So the rock and roll avalanche really started in 1955.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so it was really rock and roll that gave you an escape from your grief and sadness. And
yeah, what I saw is my dismal, kind of hopeless life.
Yeah, because there wasn't help back then.
There's no help back then. No. We were a lower, I guess a lower class family.
Yeah, I don't think I think no matter who needed help back then in whatever way, especially for grief or mental illness, I think that there was that wasn't something people did.
No, I agree. There weren't therapists, there weren't counselors available really. And if there were, they really didn't understand.
Yeah.
How to
so
do
you
it.
found.
So, I felt very lonely, even though I had 5 siblings, and I felt very lonely and alone, with no one to talk to and no one to help me sort out, the sadness I was going through. And so rock and roll, Bill Haley and the Comets, Rock Around the Clock. When I listened to that music, I felt kind of regenerated. I just felt an energy from that music that kind of shook me out of my doldrums.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1955 was just a huge year. I think I turned 12 at the end of 1955. And that year had so many great hits all in one year, and they were all new. Elvis Presley was coming out with new songs. It seemed like every couple of weeks, and there were just it was like a huge dam broke.
And there was something about the beat and the rhythm.
Yeah, it was just the beat kind of got inside me a little bit, and I used to keep beat by Well, actually, I had a headboard on my bed, and I used to beat my head against the headboard to keep beat, which probably wasn't too good for my head. But it made me, it was an escape for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt happy when I was hearing that music and keeping the beat to it.
Now,
And
back then, how was rock and roll defined?
well, it was really, it was a combination um, of the blues
And rhythm, maybe?
and rhythm and blues, and then country western music.
Okay.
It was kind of those two brought together
Mm-hmm.
with a faster beat and some a lot louder electric instruments, some electric bass and amplified guitar,
Yeah.
and then oftentimes a saxophone, and then a good drum set for the backbeat. And, so it was a totally new sound. It wasn't anything like the old hit parade songs. It was just a lot faster and a lot more energetic, and it just appealed to me. And I wasn't the only one. It was a rock and roll revolution across the whole nation, and it happened just so quickly.
Yeah.
And there were new songs and new artists every week, it seemed like. And there were a couple of radio stations in Minneapolis that were exclusively rock and roll stations that sprung up very quickly around 1955. And some of the songs were in artists all in 1955 or shortly after were "Oh Boy" by Buddy Holly and the Crickets, "Tutti Frutti" by Little Richard. Fats Domino had a number of hits, including "Blueberry Hill," and Elvis had a ton of them. Chuck Berry was a wild man and he had a crazy beat and singing voice. He sang "Johnny Be Good," and Elvis did "All Shook Up." Jerry Lee Lewis, whole lot of shaking going on. He stood up on his piano and pounded the keys, and then Carl Perkins, "Blue Suede Shoes." Hound Dog was a huge hit for Elvis, and a guy named Eddie Cochran, who was one of my favorites, he sang "Summertime Blues," and he would have been a huge star, but he died at the age of 29. He was in London, very popular over there, doing a show, and he died in an auto accident when he was 29 years old. So that was unfortunately the end of Eddie Cochran. But there was Jackie Wilson, who did "Reet Petite," "Sweetest Girl I Ever Want to Meet," and then Jerry Lee Lewis. He was a wild man, "Great Balls of Fire," and he actually stood up on his piano, and I don't know how or the piano bench, I guess, and played the keys, and he was just wild and fun, and just extremely fast.
You know what you're talking about this makes me aware of is that I wasn't into that music when I was young for many reasons, but I know almost all those songs.
Yeah, they were hard to evade.
They're still, I think even younger people today know them because they're classics.
Yeah, they are.
I know them. If I know them, everybody knows them.
Well, they've kind of stood the test of time.
They have.
I think,
there's something I know the tune to, and I may not remember all the words exactly, but yeah, I know those songs.
Yeah.
And there's something about them that is uplifting.
I agree.
And the beat does have a lot to do with it, I think.
One that I don't remember listening to during the mid-50s, but I've listened to lately is by Wanda Jackson, and it's called Let's Have a Party, and that's just wild.
Is that the one you played?
Yeah, yeah.
It was
It's
good.
a crazy great song.
Yeah.
And then "At the Hop" by Danny and the Juniors was a big hit, and Gene Vincent, "Bebopalula," "Lipstick on Your Collar" by Connie Francis was a huge hit, and "Chantilly Lace" by the Big Bopper, "Maybelline" by Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry was very prominent in rock and roll back then. Mm. And a little bit "A Pretty One" by Thurston Harris was a catchy tune. Oh. And the term rock and roll, goes way back to the sailors of the 1700s, and when they were on their ships and there was a storm and high winds, and those ships were just rocking back and forth and up and down, and they called it rocking and rolling on those ships. And then in the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, during the flapper area, the term rock and roll was defined by some groups as sexual intercourse. You're going to rock and roll. It was having sex. So it's been
That
incorporated
fits.
into a lot of meanings. Yeah, yeah. In the 1950s, when rock and roll started, there was a change in recordings too. They went from first they went from 78s to 33 and a thirds, I guess, and then for the rock and roll songs, they came out on these new record formats called 45 RPM, and they were smaller diameter records with a bigger hole in the middle, and they had one side, the song they thought was going to be most popular by the artist was on the A side, and then a less popular one was on the B side. Once in a while, what they thought was wrong, and the audience flipped it, and the audience liked some of those records better for the B side than the A side, but that didn't happen too often.
I remember those little things that you could stick in the middle so you could play those.
You could play them on a regular 78 record player.
Yeah.
You could set it to 45 RPM.
Right.
Yeah, and then another thing that really contributed to all this fantastic fever for rock and roll was Dick Clark's American Bandstand, which started on the TV in 1957, and it was a must-watch for a lot of the junior high kids. I was in junior high at the time, and we would all actually come home, or so many of us, and turn on American Bandstand in Dick Clark, and they would have the actual artists, the new artists. There are always new artists being created that sang these rock and roll songs, and they would have them on as kind of advertising the new songs, and then they'd invite all these kids from Philadelphia. The show originated in Philadelphia, and they'd be dancing on American Bandstand, and they would do the Lindy, I don't know, the other swing dances, and then they invented some new ones to go along with the new songs. And so it was just a phenomenon, sweeping the nation, really.
Now, when did Chubby Checkers come along?
He came along a little later. I think he might have been in the early 60s.
Oh, okay.
And he came out with the twist. And that was huge. And I actually met him once at a dance here in Minneapolis, and he was a great guy. He gave me a picture of himself, and he was just nice to everyone who came up to him, and the music was great. It was at a big bowling alley here around town, and so the rock and roll from 1955 to 1960, 61, it was just new songs all the time and a lot of excitement, and no one could hardly wait for the new songs. But then it started to kind of slow down in 1960, a little after. Elvis joined the Army, and there were four major contributors to rock and roll: the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and a couple others. I think there were four that died in an airplane crash in Iowa, and that was a big loss. And then a couple of them were incarcerated. One of my favorites, Chuck Berry, he was in jail for transporting a underage girl across state borders. And who else was in jail? There was another big time player. Oh, I think it might have been Jerry Lee Lewis. I don't know. He married his cousin who was 14. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it wasn't Jerry Lee, but some other big star was in jail, and there were just a lot of reasons that it started to change. And in the early 60s, they actually stopped using the term rock and roll. And the new songs that were coming out in the early mid-60s were just called rock songs. And the Beatles were a huge influence. They didn't come over till, I think it was maybe mid-60s, maybe 63, 64.
Was that late, huh?
I think so. And that they were like Elvis. I mean, they were just kids were crazy for the Beatles. I was a little older then, and I think I was last year of high school or out of high school, and so the Beatles didn't grab me the way they did all these younger junior high and kids, but they were huge, and they kind of supplanted some of the rock and roll. And they weren't really, they were considered, they started calling their music and the other popular music of the city of the 60s, they just started calling it rock music, not rock and roll. And so it was rock music. And there were a lot of different derivations of rock music. And, but they had a strong beat, you know, and the Rolling Stones, and it was, I can see why that was so popular too. And, but my favorite music as an adult was loosely categorized as, I called it country folk. And this is from the 1990s up till now. And it's also called Americana, as a sweeping generalization of it and other forms under it. But it's country folk or country rock, sometimes it's called. And the singers are like John Prine, Iris DeMent, Butch Hancock, Jimmy Dale Gilmore, Guy Clark, Joe Ely. They're not as well known, but for me personally, they're singer-songwriters. They typically write their own music and sing their own songs. A lot of them are based out of Texas. They considered Willie Nelson one of their own, and I really love that music too now. So it's kind of, you know, it was kind of a rebirth of my love of music in the 90s when I started listening to that too. And overall, just rock and roll and music in general helped me a lot through some trying times in my life.
Well, just to put a little different spin on this, since John came up with this topic, I was trying to think of what sort of shaped me, what music did, and I to this day really like music that my parents would play, like Stormy Weather, Someone to Watch Over Me, the Tennessee Waltz, and those tug at my heartstrings, and I just love the songs, you know, that they were beautiful. And there were so many more that I can't really think of. And in high school, I was a total nerd. So I liked things that people like the Kingston Trio. And I was embarrassed about the things I liked. And also my uncle would take me to the symphony, and I became quite fond of classical music, but I could never play it at home because my mother said it made her too sad. And for me, it's just the opposite. And when I need to calm down or stay focused on whether it's painting or whatever, I turn on the Baroque channel through Pandora and just go. You know, it just moves me into a good spot.
Yeah.
Just the opposite of sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was thinking earlier today when we were talking about doing this video of how important music was for me when I was a young woman in graduate school, coming out to people as gay. And there was such great women's female singers doing, you know, it was sort of rock, but I mean folk.
Mm-hmm.
And I know one of the Weavers, I can't think of her name right off, who was alive, would come to that. I really was into Pete Seeger, Arlo Guthrie, all that. But these Holly Near, Meg Christian, there were people that toured around the country, and they weren't just focused on gay rights or being gay in their music, but on a whole wide range of contemporary issues. And that feminist music of that time was just, I can remember playing those albums and just they would just make me feel so good. And it wasn't so much just about being able to say who I was at that moment, but they were talking about bigger issues and the impact we have on the world. And it was quite moving, and I mean, gave me a lot of joy.
Oh yeah, I loved folk music. I mean, I like Peter,
Mhm.
Paul and Mary.
Yeah.
I like the Limelighters with Glenn Yarborough.
Oh yeah, Glenn Yarborough.
I think Glenn Yarborough had one of the greatest voices
and Judy
ever.
Collins.
And
back
Judy
then.
Collins
and
and
Joan Baez. Those
yeah,
were
and
people-
Nancy Griffith was just one of my all
yeah,
time
I
favorites.
don't.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
liked her a lot. She was another Texas songwriter,
Huh.
and she was very good. And yeah,
Cool.
I think the Indigo Girls were part of that movement too, weren't they?
I think they were later.
Oh, were
and
they?
I was busy doing too much of real life, and I
Yeah.
didn't.
And I know for a couple of years there were the Lilith Fair group
I
of
remember hearing about.
Yeah.
Oh, there was Honey in the Rock, which was a black women doing feminist music.
yeah, they were
back
pretty
then.
well known.
and really good.
Yeah, and Lilith Fair I think was a whole group of them that traveled around the country and put on concerts,
Yeah.
and for a couple of years they were really popular and a big deal. So
But I also fell in love with Stefan Grappelli back then, and there was like some, not throat singers, but it was a Slavic group of women that did more tonal singing.
oh yeah.
I love that Gregorian chants. I'm all over the
Yeah,
board when it
well,
comes to music.
I had my brother, who I love very much. He's 3 years younger than me, and he died just about 3 months ago, 4 months ago, and he was just an expert on all kinds of music, and musical instruments, and so I always went to him for information, and I miss him so much because he was just so knowledgeable and so interesting, especially about music. He was just a genius about it. And, so he helped me a lot with some of the more obscure music that you didn't hear on the radio. And one of them was about throat singing.
Mm-hmm. That
in
is
some,
really
I don't know, it was in some exotic country where they did throat
Mhm.
singing. And I went to a concert once, and they can really, when they sing together, they can achieve a new sound that no one can achieve on their
Right.
own voice. But when those voices blend together, they create harmonics.
Yes, it's amazing.
That's a whole different
Mhm.
sound, and it's just soaring,
Yes.
and it's ringing. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot to explore,
There
and I'd
is.
like to know more about that too.
So exciting.
But regular old rock got me through a lot of. And I've got a. Do we have time?
Yeah, you can
I've got a few
play us
clever,
off here with these
clever,
song titles.
what I consider clever song titles.
Yeah, I think they're pretty clever.
Yeah, here we go. Drop Kick Me Jesus Through the Goalpost of Life, sung by
Ooh.
Bobby Bear. Friends in Low Places, sung by Garth Brooks. And here's a good one that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Goodbye Earl, and it's by the Chicks, formerly the Dixie Chicks, but now the Chicks. And then, of course, a classic, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, by Hank Williams. And then here's a funny one. She's Acting Single and I'm Drinking Doubles. And I'm not sure who
I
sang
think
that.
that's a great title.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And then a classic one is A Boy Named Sue by Johnny
Oh,
Cash.
yeah.
That's just a great song. And here's Hank Williams, one of my all-time favorite songwriters and singers is Hank Williams Sr. And unfortunately, he died at a very early age. He was in his Cadillac convertible, and I think it went head-on during a misty, stormy night in the South. But Hank Williams, I'll never get out of this world alive. And then Eddie Cochran, I mentioned earlier, and he was Just Sitting in the Balcony is a great song. Plus Summer, I think he's got one called Summertime Blues too. And here's a funny one. How Come Your Dog Don't Bite Nobody But Me? Mel Tillis and Webb Price Pierce sing that song. And then my one of my all-time favorites is Little Richard. and Good Golly Miss Molly.
Yeah.
And then there's Woolly Bully by Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. And Boney Maroney by Larry Williams. Oh, and here, I know this is not very PC, but if I said you had a beautiful body, would you hold it against me?
No.
Thank you.
I might have once, but not now.
Okay. That's by the Bellamy Brothers. I just think that is so clever. Don't Rock the Jukebox, Alan Jackson, another great country western singer. Red Roses for a Blue Lady by Wayne Newton and others. And then one of my early favorites, and this is from 1954 or 55, is The Moonlight Gambler by Frankie Lane. And then Tutti Frutti, Little Richard. Good Golly Miss Molly by Little Richard.
Oh, you did those already.
Did I already say that?
Yeah.
Oh, I must be starting over. Oh no, here we go. Don't it make my brown eyes blue
I like
by
that.
Crystal Gale. That's very clever. And Afternoon Delight by the Starland Vocal Band. And You've Got Betty Davis Eyes. That's a beautiful song. Very clever by Kim Carnes. And last but not least is Rockin' Robin by Bobby Day. That's it, folks.
Okay, we're going to rock right out of here.
Yeah, I wish I had a song to play, but I don't have one. And I'm not going to sing one. That'll be the day.